Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of Nobody Asked Us with Des and Kara. This is Des Linden, joined with my co-host, Kara Goucher. Welcome to episode 7.
7 episodes. We're big time.
Yeah, we're going to lose count and we're going to have to go to the number on the top of the browser.
Totally. But Chris is letting us know by telling us at the top of the browser what episode we're on.
Exactly. Now, today's super special because it's going to be pub day for Kara Goucher. Her book is out in the wild, in your hands, hopefully now. And The Longest Race is, I think it's a must read. There's so much to go into. And I was reading it, going through all the layers of it. And I think this is going to have to be some type of multi-episode thing at some point. But we'll just dive in and tell us a little bit about the book in general. What got you interested in writing this? Why did you want to do it? Why now? And how did you pick your co-writer?
So I wanted to write the book for a long time, mostly because people would talk about my time at the Organ Project, and there was misinformation. People would talk about me like with facts, people that I hadn't even met. And also I just felt like I just needed to tell my own story from my own voice. And so kind of made that decision, was encouraged by my husband to go for it. And at the time I had an agent, Shannon Burnett, and she just started talking to other people who wrote books, set up meetings for me. This will make you laugh. One of the people that she reached out to is Bonnie Ford, who was like politely declined, but said yes to Des.
And then she might have been already tied up.
She might have been, but I think it worked out great. Yeah. So I met with a few people in person, and I had really, really liked Jessica Luther. She lives in Texas, and she's written a lot of really cool stuff about sport. And we had met and really connected. And then I had this call with Mary Pallon, and it's funny because to hear her tell it, she was kind of like not interested, just giving me the time of day to be nice. But what was supposed to be a short call turned into a really long call. And then we talked again, and we just really bonded. I felt like she got me, and she's a little bit, I don't want to say snarky, but she's a little gritty, right? She's not afraid to like talk about things that are uncomfortable. And so I felt like this is a person I needed, and we got along really well. And then we shopped it around a little bit. She's a New York Times bestselling author, so actually she shopped it around. And then, we got a deal with Simon & Schuster and just started. So it's been a long time. It's been since 2019, the end of 2019, but here we are.
Very exciting. And now it's like on release date, so it's going to be in hands. I know the process is crazy long, and like just the proposal process, obviously picking your co-author. What was your guys' process like when you guys started working together and writing these pages? Is it phone interviews? Are you working on documents together? Can you just kind of break that down?
Yeah, so we spent so much time on the phone. And remember, this was COVID. So she was going to come stay with me for a while, and she wasn't able to do that during COVID. So it was just like, first, we just spent hours and hours on the phone with her recording it, and me basically like walking through my life. I mean, like everything. I've alluded to this on another episode with you, like things that I thought really were important, And then she just slowly started getting into it. And my book goes chronological order through my life. So she would write something up, kick it to me. The first few times was tough because I felt like she wasn't nailing my voice, but she was always really open to all of that. And I think that was super important. We had a really good relationship where I could tell her like, that doesn't sound like me. I don't like that. It's not ringing true. Papa's not coming through enough. Please don't call him grandpa. I'd never call him that, But then we just kind of got into a rhythm where she would send me a chapter. I would take a week or so to edit it, get it back to her. Then we'd hop on the phone and go through it together. Then she'd rewrite it and kick it back to me. And once that was good, then we'd move on. And so it was a really long process. And actually, our first draft was due in October of 2021. So the first draft of the book was due, over a year and a half ago, or a year and a half ago. And then the first draft was about 500 pages, and our editor took his time with it. And then he was like, yeah, this is way too long. I mean, there's something here. I really like it. There's something here, but we really have to carve this out. And that was a hard process of like what needs to be taken out, what shouldn't. I tend to repeat myself, and I tend to like answer a question, then always tie it up with a bow at the end. And they're like, you can't do that. And I do that in commentating too. And my producers are always like, you don't need to say that 3 times. We know what you're saying, you know? So some of it was easy to kind of cut out, but some of it was harder, like making decisions of things that don't really add to the story that we're trying to tell. So yeah, that went on for months and months and months. I always felt like I was on my final draft because he'd be like, okay, final edits are due on Monday. Like, this is it. This is your last chance. And so I pulled a couple all-nighters. I'd edit it. We had like a joint Google Doc where I was like editing along with her. And then he'd read it. And 2 weeks later, he'd be like, okay, well, this is the final edit, you know? So I quickly learned there's no such thing as like the final edit. I mean, now it's officially done, but yeah. So it just was a lot of work, but in sporadic times, you know, like there would be a few days where it was really a lot of work. I'm reading everything, I'm stressing out, and then a week of nothing. But eventually, Mary did come out to Boulder and was able to stay with us and go through my treasure trove of like old articles and things from high school. And it was really fun, actually. And so that was cool. I felt like that also brought us closer together when she was able to come visit.
How much were these phone calls and even just the docs, like, it kind of starts to feel like a therapy session? Did you have that experience where you're like, okay, maybe this is too much? Or, I mean, there's a process of opening up. And did you guys start at the beginning and work through, or did you kind of go with stuff that, like, I know this the best, or I want to start here?
We mostly went chronological, although there were a few things that like I left out. Some instances with Alberto running the Boston Marathon in 2009. You know, she was like, well, we have to put that in there. And I was like, well, I can't really talk about that. It's like so stupid. But I was just protecting my heart.
Yeah.
And so we eventually had to get to those places, right? Because I didn't want to not talk about Boston and how it affected me. And I didn't not want to talk about these instances with Alberto, but it had to be right. And there were days where literally I would just cry and talk to her, and she would listen and be awesome, and we'd get no work done. But those were just a few days that I can really think of where I was really upset, or an article had been written about me while we were working on it, or something happened and then the whole thing was put back in the news cycle, and always misinformed. Nothing was ever accurate that was being written. And so then when I would talk to her, I'd just be like raging for a half hour and then crying for a half hour. And then she'd be like, okay, well, I think we're not going to work today. So I'll call you back in a couple days. So yeah, it was you're bringing up a lot of stuff, and I've been able to read your book. I'm so excited about. And I imagine same thing for you. Like, you're bringing up things that are really personal, some things that you've compartmentalized and pushed away. But if you're really going to tell the story of who you are and how you got to be, you have to revisit those things. So it is hard. It is hard talking about that stuff, but it's also important because it helps you become who you are and act the way you act.
Yeah, I think that authenticity and like honesty is so important if you're going to do a book like this, because people can tell when you're leaving a section out, or you're guarded, or it's not, like, the reader's aware that this is not the full story. And in reading yours, I mean, that start to finish, it's just so in depth, and it's the full picture. And I think there's all these different parts that I want to go into, but I think it's just, there's a couple key things. And I just want to ask you, like, what's the big takeaway, really broad picture? Like, what did you want to get across? Like, what's the most important message you wanted to deliver with this?
I think for me, I think it's just that, not to be cheesy, but like, we can get through hard things. There's been a lot of things in my life that were difficult, but at the end of the day, I'm like very, very happy. And so one of the things is just you can survive a lot more than you think and still be happy, and it doesn't take away from you. If you have suffered abuse, that doesn't define you at all. That's not like something you have to carry. And then what was the third thing? Oh, that like little things that you do can add up to big change. And like, you have the power to make these changes, and you have the power to be the driver of your own story and of your own life. So that's kind of like a cheesy thing, but all those things are important to me.
checks out. I mean, it shines through. I think. No, I think that we talked about this a little bit in the very first episode of our podcast, and it was this sort of crazy self belief. And starting at the beginning of the book, how you get into running and what it takes you through. Where did you find, like, when did you kind of have this moment where you're like, running is my passion and I believe that I'm going to go somewhere with this and have, I think you described it a couple times and I might have as well as psycho, like this
Yeah.
psycho belief that I'm going to take this somewhere. And like, when did that kick in? And did you carry that with you throughout your entire career?
Yeah, I think when I realized that organized running, like a team, was a thing, I was 12 when I joined my middle school cross country team, and I loved it so much. I just like literally couldn't believe that there was like practice and you would just go run without any other equipment, like you're just running. And I right away was like, oh, this is my thing. I was still doing a lot of sports. I still danced competitively throughout high school and played soccer, but I knew right away when I was 12 years old, like, oh, this is my thing. Because before that, it had just been something fun that my grandpa and I did together, or I'd run a race here or there. I think for me, a huge thing that impacted my life was watching Lynn Jennings win the bronze medal in Barcelona in 92. It really opened my eyes to like, oh, you could be somebody, like I had been obsessed with the Olympics my whole life. I mean, this is God's honest truth. I did my homework to the music that comes on when you're watching the Olympics. And I still have that CD in my car. Like I always was obsessed with the idea of going to the Olympics. And so I had no idea what a professional runner's life looked like or a coaching situation I had no concept of what that would look like. But really when I saw Lynn Jennings win that, I went from like, oh, I love the Olympics to like, no, I want to do that. That's what I want to be.
Yeah, I think that that's like the Olympics are such an interesting tie and it kind of hits you at your emotional core and it's different than other jobs per se because it's like something you have to earn. Um, and then you go to Colorado and you start on that process. What was your relationship like with Mark Wetmore? That's like your first serious coaching situation and like you get to pick him out, but what was like meeting him like and what was your time at Colorado like and how was Mark influential as your first like serious coach, if that's fair to call him?
Yeah, totally. He was for sure my first serious coach. So actually, when I was recruited to Colorado, or when I sold myself to Colorado, if I'm being honest, they had a female coach for the women's team. And so I met with Toby Jacober. She was the female coach. And I had a very short meeting with Mark Wetmore. And I remember thinking like, ugh, I'm glad I'm not going to be coached by him. Then that summer, Toby Jacober called me and told me she would be leaving the team and that we'd be in good hands. Mark Wetmore would be taking over the women's program. So I went in my freshman year a little bit like I didn't get recruited by this guy. I had literally had a very, very short conversation with him, but I was shocked at like he's kind of a softie. And I mean, this tells you how, no offense, Mark, but like how long ago this was because we would go up to Magnolia and I really struggled adjusting to the altitude, like really struggled. And we'd go up to Magnolia Road, which is at 8,000 feet, and everyone would go and he would run with me up there. And I mean, Mark, God bless him, but he can't run like that anymore. He still runs every day, but so I think he was a great mentor to me and he really was always talking about long term. You know, you're a freshman, by the time you're a junior, maybe you could do this, by the time you're a senior, you could do this. And so that was one of the things he really instilled in me was being patient. Like you can't just skip forward. You have to spend those couple of years building up your mileage and doing the work. You can't just unless you're Bob Kennedy or Adam Goucher, you can't just your freshman year step in and like win the national title. It just doesn't work that way for most people. And so I think that was one of the biggest lessons I got from him, but he had a lot of faith in me. And so I had a lot of faith in him. And it was just a really good partnership. I mean, I really trusted him. I believed in, and also there was like athletes around me that were running amazing. Alan Culpepper won a national title at Colorado. Adam Goucher, obviously my husband, Shane Culpepper, who was Shane Willie at the time, Kelly Smith, like people were running really well and people were being given the opportunity to chase running beyond college. So I could see that if I stayed the course and I believed in him and I did the work, like it would get me to where I was hoping to go.
Did he coach you your first few years as a pro? Like, did he help you with that process, or did you kind of venture out on your own?
No, he helped me. Yeah. So he coached me for 8 years, 5 years at Colorado. And then I stayed in Boulder for 3 years after. But I was not in a good place. I was getting injured all the time. I had a bunch of femoral stress fractures. And also, I went from being like the focus of his day to now I'm just a post collegiate, like he's a college coach. And so I think between my constant injuries and feeling like he wasn't as invested in me as I wanted him to be, looking back, it all makes sense. But in that moment, I was emotional. It was like sort of emotional, like you used to care about me and now I'm just like second fiddle. And Adam was struggling as well. So we decided together that we were going to leave him. And that's one of Adam's biggest regrets. For me, I was lucky enough to come back and be coached by him again at the end of my career, but it was hard to leave, but I just couldn't stay healthy. And I felt like I've tried this for 3 years. I am not going anywhere. So I either need to move on or try something new.
That's such a fascinating thing because you have to buy into it like with your full heart, and then you don't see the results, and it's almost like you're figuring out, is it like a commitment? Is it me? Is it you? Like, how does that balance work? Did you guys talk to him before leaving about where you're headed off to? I'm assuming
Yeah,
like,
he didn't know we were. Yeah, so we met with him because Adam had told a newspaper writer that, at the Olympic trials, like, F this, we're out of here. And the guy was like, well, what does that mean? Are you going to leave Mark? And he's like, maybe. So he had like a little warning. I do remember we went in and met with him. At that point, we had no idea where we were going to go. We were talking to Brad Hudson and Pete Julian, who were local coaches at that time. And I just remember I cried the whole time. Adam talked to him and he was like, we only have so much time in our careers. And, Adam had been with him for maybe 10 years at that
wow.
point. And so it was hard. And I just remember I cried the whole time. And he wasn't warm and fuzzy about it. He was like, well, good luck. Bye. I think his feelings were hurt. Our feelings were hurt. We all let a little bit of emotion come into it. But yeah, it was tough. And so then when we started, I talked to some other coaches. We went to Wisconsin to see what the setup was like there. Eventually, we went out to Oregon to see what the setup was like out there. But I never talked to Mark again in person until 2013.
It's like a weird breakup. I feel
Yes.
like understanding that connection between a coach and an athlete and what that's like, and when you get someone who understands your psycho vision of what you can be and what you
Yep.
want to achieve, and they go like, no, that's not crazy, I'm going to meet you right here and we're going to get that together. It's just a rare thing, and it's a powerful thing. And I'm teeing this all up because obviously you transition to Oregon Project and you meet Alberto, and suddenly he's invested in you in that similar way. What was that transition like, and going from a Nike athlete to a Nike Oregon Project athlete? Did that look different, and how so?
Oh, yeah. It was really different because we were on the Nike campus every day, right? Like John Capriati, who writes the contracts, could just look out his window and watch us working out on the field below. So, when we decided we were going to leave Mark Wetmore, we met with some coaches in Boulder. We went out to Wisconsin, and ironically, we talked to Jerry Schumacher for Adam, Peter Teagan for me. And we had been visiting Duluth, and we had driven there and drove back. And Adam told my grandpa, like, Kara really wants to go there. She'll be close to you guys. And we like totally thought we were going to move to Wisconsin. And then Adam got this call from Alberto Salazar, and he was like, oh, sorry, I missed your calls. Like, I want you to come out. So we went out and met with him, and he hadn't coached women He had, but not with any like I don't know what I'm trying to say. It wasn't like a long term thing. He hadn't coached women over years of time. He had coached men and a high school boys team, and so the recruiting visit was interesting because he wanted Adam. That's what he wanted. He saw himself in Adam. He felt like he could bring Adam back. Adam had been struggling, and then he kept saying to me like, "And like I coach high school boys. That's about like what you are, you know." But when we saw the facilities and we saw like we had both been injured a lot, we saw the medical support we were going to get. We just were like, it would be crazy to say no. And he even said 6 months, I will pay for everything. Come for 6 months. Don't sell your house. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And so we moved out there, and within 6 months, I got another stress fracture. But Adam started running really well again and was like coming back to the form that he was in. And so we were committed. Alberto and I didn't really get closer until a couple of years in 2006 really was when I started finally staying healthy, putting together full seasons. And that's when he and I started to get closer, and he started to be more and more invested in me. And yeah, it felt good. You know, it was like, this guy's a legend. He believes in me. He believes I could do something really special someday. Like, yeah, I was hook, line, sinker in, especially once he was showing more commitment to me.
And it sort of feeds into it like each other, right? Like you get the attention, like I'm a pro, someone's invested me, then the results come, and then the attention comes, and it's like this chicken egg thing. I just think it's like interesting for people to understand. I think there'll be like when I read this, I'm like, I completely understand these scenarios, and I think people will be like, how could you have not seen this, or like why would you be in this situation? And that relationship of your coach buying into you, and then you start to see these other things throughout the book, like when did this sort of us versus them mentality start taking shape? Because I feel like we've all experienced that. You get on a team and it's like everyone's jealous, or we have
Yep.
the advantages. Like how did that start shaping up? And obviously that probably was really well tied to your success and better performances coming along. How does that all work together?
Yeah, I think early on we were reminded of how lucky we were. Like anyone would take our position. And it was true. I mean, like the Oregon project was amazing, and we had whatever you wanted, we got it. There was no limit on where we could travel to or where we could do training camp. But especially as I started running better, it became a lot like that, very isolating. We didn't stay at the hotel with everybody else. We had a different hotel. Um, they're a lot of that. They're jealous. They wish they had what you had. And looking back, it's very uncomfortable for me because there were so many red flags. But in the moment, I was like, yeah, they are jealous of us. They wish they had Ultra G treadmill, or they wish they could just go to Park City whenever they want. And we're here to do it right, and we're trying to do big things. And um, I was 100% in on that. Like, felt like it was us versus the world. People didn't understand us. People didn't understand how hard we were willing to work, every stone we were willing to turn over. But when I look back, that was a way of really isolating me and manipulating me, so that anytime I saw something that was weird, I just could explain it away. It was just like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. He wouldn't lie to me or this or that. And, um, but yeah, when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I was so naive.
But I think that's another way to build that trust, right? Like it always goes back to like the price of your dream, and those things allow us to be better, which is going to allow you to make the Olympics, get a medal. Like it all makes sense, and I think it happens quite frequently. And I understand the buy-in process. So there's also like Alberto being this kind of mad scientist and wanting to try these like medical experiments, and um, you just kind of roll with it. It seems like, but like people will read and think this is like, how did this happen? And it makes total sense. And so you have this coach that you're buying into, and he's willing to do all of these things and go the extra mile for you. And you start to get these massages, which, like, again, it's makes sense. This guy is super invested in you and wants to do everything. Um, what was that initially like? And like, how did you find yourself trusting that this is normal?
Right. So the thought of Mark Wetmore giving me a massage is like, what? No, that would never ever happen. Right. But it was different with Alberto. It was like another extension of how much he cared about everybody. And the thing was, like, we'd be up at altitude camp and like he would just massage Galen in front of us. He'd massage Adam in front of us. He would massage me. And so it didn't seem weird. Of course, it seems weird when I look back on it. But at the time, it just was what was happening all around me. And again, Alberto is this like legendary figure. I mean, he's very charismatic. People flocked to him. People wanted to be a part of any way they could be a part of the Oregon Project. And, you know, I think when he first started doing the massages, like out in the condo, um, tucking your shorts up your butt, I felt like, well, that's weird. But then he did it to everybody. So then I'm thinking, well, nobody else has a problem with it. It's just Alberto. Like, he's just trying to give us a little flush. It's fine. Um, and I think too, like, you compartmentalize things. I think as an athlete, you get really good at that because you have to compartmentalize pain. You have to compartmentalize emotion. Like in a race, a marathon, you can't be emotional. You have to really dictate. So I also think things that to the outside world would seem weird, I'd just be like, oh, that's just Alberto, and then just push it away. And it wasn't until years later when I'm taking a step back and talking this through with a therapist or the anti-doping, USADA, and they're like, I'm sorry, what? And there was a lot of embarrassment that came from that. But I think it just was the way the program was. It was normal. Everybody just got massaged like that. It's no big deal. It's just Alberto. He cares so much. He wants to be involved in every little detail. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I like it's interesting because if you get sports massage and you're used to this, like this doesn't sound awkward at all. I'm like, yeah, it's just odd that the coach is doing it, but like
Right.
everything in running attaches like high and, up. But obviously there's a breaking point and there's right and there's wrong, and then you're left to process that. And, in your book you describe the breaking point, the tipping point. You don't have to describe it again. Obviously, it turns from massage to sexual abuse. And to me, it's like this house of cards has been built. And I looked at it this like it's from a standing back outside perspective. It's like this was all like tailored and manipulated to have this moment where everything's on the line for you, and now you're being taken advantage of. Did you feel that way, or was it just like oops? Or how do you process this when this starts happening?
Yeah. So I talk about this in the book, but like it couldn't be true in my mind. It had to be a mistake. There's no way he would hurt me like that. There's no way he would abuse me like that. And also, you have to remember, I mean, you were too at the Hansons, but like I was the most of the time the lone female on everything. And I would travel alone with just males, with Alberto and Darren, or just Alberto. Um, and if I let myself think that he had abused me in that way, where do I go? First of all, now someone's broke, like I feel dirty for my marriage, right? I feel like I somehow did something wrong to Adam. Then who do I go to in the program? Do I go to Darren, who is paid by Alberto? Do I go above him to John Capriotti? I mean, everyone at the project is male, and the project is having it's extremely successful. I'm easily disposable, right? Like I'm just one person. The Oregon Project itself is having extreme success. So honestly, I just had to convince myself it was a mistake. It had to be. It had to be. He cared about me. He's a family man. I must have I know that this happened to me, but it had to have been an accident. And that's how I lived for 3 years, just convincing myself this wasn't real. And then it happened again. And then it was like that was a lot harder for me to put in a box, because now it has happened again. And again, I was alone. But again, at this point, I'm running really well, right? Like I might win the Boston Marathon in a month. Like I can't deal with this. If this is real, it shatters my entire life, like literally my entire existence, everything I believe in, everything I worked for. And so my solution was just tuck it in a box, put it away, and never ever travel without Adam again. And then everything will be fine. And
That
that's what
was
I
gonna
did.
that was gonna be my question, is like, how did these instances parallel your success? Like, it seems like as you had a moment of success, that's when this would happen. And then, like, you keep climbing the ladder, and it's like they seem in tandem to a degree. Does it feel that way, or is that observational just error?
Yeah, a little bit looking back for sure. Like the first time it happened was as I was really finding my footing and setting personal bests and running world championship qualifying marks. And then again, it was as I was like heading into the Boston Marathon, where I had come off a successful New York. So, but again, like I'm right where I've dreamt of being since I saw Lynn Jennings in 1992 win that medal. Like what it has to be a mistake, because otherwise I'm like so close to my dreams, and it just has to be a mistake. It just has to be, because otherwise I lose everything that I've worked for. And again, my marriage, like everything could potentially be on the line. So it's super messed up. And of course, I wish I could go back and do things differently, but I just, again, put it in a box, said, I'll make sure Adam's with me so nothing like this ever happens again, and go get all those things that I've always wanted. Does that make
How
sense?
100%. How did you actually posted, this is like a kind of a detour, so we're gonna pause, but you posted a Instagram about winning the world champion, or running in the world championship and getting that bronze medal. And you said you had this conversation before going out and getting your medal, and I think it was Adam Nelson said your life's about to change. Like, how did it change? What type of things did you see differently? And I think this is, if you're interested in talking about this, in a way to talk about contracts, and how you make a living in the sport.
My life changed overnight. I mean, overnight, I went to the the world championships were still going on. I went to Nike Hospitality. There's reporters waiting to talk to me. They have a giant picture of me hanging. Craig Masbach was the CEO of USATF at the time, was like, I need to meet with you. Like overnight, I went from Adam's wife to someone that people wanted to talk to. I got offered my first ever appearance fee to go run at the Great North Run. I had never been paid to run in I had my contract, which was $35,000 at the time, but no one had ever given me money to go to race somewhere. I always just got in because I was Adam's wife. So overnight, it was insanity. And like so also at that time, Nike agreed to redo my contract, which took a while, but that ended up basically adding like a zero to it, basically. And it was craziness. And then like I rode back, I started riding on the Nike Jet here and there. I mean, it was just such a different life than I had had before that moment. Before that moment, it was me with a dream, a husband who totally believed in my dream, my family who did, Alberto who thought he could help me get there. But to everyone else, it was like, who is she? She's like a washed up college runner. She was really good in college, right? And so when that happened, all of a sudden, it wasn't just me and my little crew believing I could do it. It was like just so different. And for a while, it did end up changing my relationship with my love of running, to be honest. Like after that medal, New York was okay, but the New York City Marathon, but like nothing else was ever good enough after that. And when I look back, it makes me feel sad because everything was a disappointment to my team after that medal. Like nothing was fun and exciting anymore. And I think I lost a lot of myself in that process. Um, but yeah, my life, it definitely changed. I mean, I was started being on covers of magazines, getting paid to run. People knew who I was. I couldn't just go to a meet and run for fun, or like run an 800 and see what I can get. Like there's a million people there to watch it and they want to ask me about it afterwards. So, and there's also good things too, obviously, like endless opportunity to explore the sport in different ways. Um, but it did feel like it got away from me. Like the me from 1992 that wanted it, it felt like I was losing her more and more.
Were you an Olympian at that point?
Well, I made the
Is
team in '08.
That's right.
So the medal
Okay.
was in '07. And then, yeah,
Did that feel satisfying making that team?
it did. Um, I made the 10K team first. Shalane had won and I got second. And I do remember just feeling like finally this has happened. And then I ran the 5K as well. And I won my first national title winning that 5K. And so for like a brief moment, like my family was there and Adam's family was there, and my birthday was during the trials. We all went up to Portland and celebrated. But there was also angst because Adam hadn't made it. But for like a brief moment, it felt like, oh my God, everything's coming true. But, Beijing Olympics weren't that fun. My coach was really disappointed in me the whole time, Alberto. Um, it just felt like it wasn't what I dreamt it was going to be. It just wasn't.
I think that's an interesting topic. It could be a podcast all of its own, but like the level of disappointment after the Olympics, um, it's just the experience for most people is not what you expect, or you're left feeling like it. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't worth it. I think your description in the book was like it kind of breaks your heart a little bit. Like there was a number of times in the book where it's like I totally get that. I mean, how do you move forward from that? And I guess first, like, why do we have such imposter syndrome at the games? Like, you describe it as this really stressful thing, and you're like, you're coming off your medal. Like, what about it makes it different? And why do we get that way?
I think because it's just so big in the media. Like the build up to the games was so intense with media. I remember like they had Kara Goucher Day in Duluth, and the mayor was like, oh, "I knew you were a big deal when I saw you in Rolling Stone," and it was just like he didn't mean anything by it, but it was just like everything was so big and so heightened, and um, I just felt detached from how I got the medal, which was having fun, training really hard, taking risks, and it didn't feel fun anymore. And the opening ceremony, I'm so glad I went. Like it was like one of my biggest goals in life was to see the torch lit in person. So I was so glad that I went and had that moment. But literally from there on, it sucked. And I was away from all the things that made me feel calm. I couldn't get Adam into the village. There weren't like enough day passes and stuff. So I couldn't even see him. I just felt like the more it went on, the more like I just wasn't myself. I just felt really disconnected. And also, since you've been at the Olympics, if you don't medal, no one cares. And like our friends and family care, but the media makes it very clear as you walk up from the track or you walk away from the marathon, like what went wrong? How, it's not celebrated. It's funny you bring this up because I just had this conversation with Otto Bolden because I was saying how I never introduced myself as an Olympian because I feel like I failed at the Olympics. But other people who are not Olympians are like, "Oh my God, you went to the Olympics? Holy shit." And so it's just like so weird being from that side where you went and you had all these high hopes and you didn't achieve it. I just felt really like I don't belong here. This is like I thought I belonged here, but I don't. And I was not handling my nerves well or anything. I just felt really, really out of place. It was hard. It was a really hard experience.
And the support crew is Darren and Alberto, and how do they respond to that?
Oh, after the
Okay.
10,000, I got 10th place, I think, on the day, although I don't know, I think it's 8th now. It doesn't matter. Alberta was just like so disappointed and just let me know, like, you're not a 10K athlete. We need to move to the marathon. This is a waste of time. And I'm like, okay, well, I have the 5,000 prelims in like 3 days, you know? So should I just go home? Like, honestly, that was a moment where without Adam, there probably wouldn't have been a 5K final for me because Adam was like, this is fucking crazy. You're so good at this. This is nuts. Don't listen to them. Like you've got this. You have trained your whole life for this. But Alberto and Darren, it was really just disappointing. I mean, they just told me. Darren was like, you gave up mentally. Alberto was like, you're just not made to do this. And so, you're at the biggest stage of your life where a year ago, just being there at the World Championships was a win. Like just being there was a win. And now it's a year later and you're top 10 in the world, but it's just a huge flop. So I honestly don't know if Adam hadn't been there, I'm not sure that I would have been able to. I probably would have run the 5,000, but with no heart. And instead, I got into the final and I finished higher in that final than I had in the 10,000. So it kind of salvaged a little bit of the experience for me.
Did that level of like expectation did you shift with that too, where you're like, I have to achieve X or I'm a failure? Or was it like, these guys are telling me that I have to achieve X or I'm a failure? Like, where did that come from? And were you did you find any joy in these like magnificent races? I mean, I know you kind of talked about it, but separate what I was told versus what I thought about myself.
The Olympics were tough because I was just so overwhelmed. I would say I did have fun in that 5K. Like I really felt like in the final, I ran one of the best races of my life. I ran my PR in the 800 at the end of a 5K. So I felt like that was one of the best races of my life. On paper, it's nothing fancy. But again, it was met with like, ugh, yes, it's time to move on. And that's what I was saying, where I started to feel more and more like I wasn't running for me anymore. I wasn't running for the excitement and the love of it. I was running because people expected me to do something and needed me to do something. And I ran the New York City Marathon 8 weeks after, and it went well to most people, but to me, Alberto was like, you made mistakes, like you have a lot to learn. Um, and that's why I think the Boston Marathon in '09 was like the biggest crack in my relationship with Alberto, because I just started to realize like, I don't even have fun anymore. I hate this. It sucks and nothing's good enough. And I wasn't really running with joy anymore.
What was the tipping point? I mean, I know it's in the book and you've already showed the process of getting there, but like what was the tipping point where you're like, I'm done. Like I can't deal with this system anymore. And we haven't even gone into like supplements and doctors and all that stuff, because I think that's secondary to like sexual abuse, and then obviously just taking that self-belief and kind of diminishing it. Like there's like a level of emotional abuse that's not even talked about really, but like when you look at it big picture, you're like, oh, I feel like this was all manipulated to control somebody. Like what was the tipping point for you?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing because the tipping point was something, I believe there was no Kara without Alberto. I just did. Like that's what I was told. I believed it. I can't run. Like he's the only person I can run for. Like if I don't have Alberto, I'm nothing. And so even though there was like so much shit going on and crazy shit I was seeing that made me uncomfortable, it's kind of embarrassing to say that like the tipping point was him coming on to me when we were together alone. I couldn't compartmentalize it because it was in my face. Like he literally was in my face. And I just remember going to the bathroom and thinking like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, what have I done that he thinks that's acceptable behavior? And, that was it. I was like, really like, I just have to survive this trip. We were at the World Championships in Daegu, the World Outdoor Track and Field Championships. And I was like, as soon as this competition is over, I am gone. And so all of the things leading up to that, which you alluded to in the book, like they were all things that were making me freak out. But that was the final straw because I just thought, I am not respected here. This is not what I believed it was. And I can't do this anymore. I feel like super degraded. I just can't do it anymore.
And you talk about the main message of this book, or one of, being we can get through hard things, we can do hard things. You have this person who's set up your life in a way that you're almost dependent, and you believe it's not possible, or you've been taught to believe that it's not possible without him. Like, did I make you? Did you make me? Like, it's Alberto made Kara. How do you rip off the band-aid? Like, what, how do you do it? I mean, how can you do that difficult thing?
It was really hard, and it took some time because we kind of kept going back and forth on it. But to be totally honest, in that moment on that airplane, I had made the decision. And so it was really hard. Like, people think I'm like bitter against Alberto, or I hate this person or that person. That was one of the probably top few hardest things I've ever done in my life, was tell him I'm done. Because I was terrified of losing everything I had worked for. I was terrified that I was nothing without him. But I just, as a human, could not continue in that environment anymore. But it was so hard. And people think it was just like, oh, we broke up and then it was fine. It was not fine. It was so hard. And it was awful. It was so awful. But in that moment on that airplane, I had made that decision. And so even when, he and I would talk and he would try to convince me to stay, or I would like start to feel bad because I didn't want to hurt his feelings or anything, I would just go back to that moment and be like, yeah, no, it's done. It has to be done. So a lot of support of my family during that time. My family knew a lot more than even Adam knew. And them just encouraging me, like, you can do this and you're going to be so much happier. And that was a lie. I wasn't happier. I felt bad. I felt bad leaving that program. I felt bad. I felt like I owed who I am to them. Right. So it just sucked. It really sucked. It was really hard. And I don't think it was like until, I think I always felt bad about it. But making that Olympic team with you and Shalane was finally like a point where I could move on. It was like, okay, I did this without him. I actually made an Olympic team without Alberto. Like, I do have it inside me, and I do have the mental capacity without Alberto and Darren to do good things, to do great things.
I think that's such a like under discussed conflict, like the gratitude aspect, and knowing that that person has brought a lot to your life, and the really positive parts about the relationship, but then also going, this is the point where I've had too much, and this is obviously a boundary. We always hear about loyalty, and I kind of like, for me personally, it's like the dance with the one that brought you, and we're supposed to do that, and that's what's like preached and told to us. But if I had a child and I was sending them to a dance, it would be dance with the one that brought you. That doesn't mean they get to screw you. And like, it's a very interesting like dynamic, because you're grateful, but that doesn't mean you get to take advantage of this just because you've done something that's helped me. So that's my 2 cents on it. But I think it's, I guess we can kind of dip into this Lynn Jennings thing that has just come out. And I know it's not directly tied to your book, but it's has a lot of parallels. Longtime coach from Wellesley, she just spoke to the Globe about it, and was also a sexual abuser with minors. I think that your stories are kind of fascinating in that she had this experience and then she left, was very private, and at one point decides that she really needs this coach and goes back to him. Um, can you just talk about like what that mental process might have been like? And I mean, I know you would never consider it, but also I think that the connection between like, this person made me and I can't do it without them, is definitely very relevant.
Yeah, I was so upset to read that about Lynn Jennings a couple weeks ago, last week. But it made me sad on a lot of levels, just because she's the first person like I really truly like idolized, that was a distance runner. I had idolized FloJo and Carl Lewis, thinking maybe I was going to be a sprinter, but she was the first one that like did what I actually did. And I was able to meet her as when I was older, and um, it just made me so sad. Actually, I cried a lot. That was just a week ago, but when that broke, but I just felt sick to my stomach. I felt like I got it. And the fact that she went back, that resonated with me as well, because you have these situations where you think, I need them. I need them to help me be good. And I'll have to deal with that later, what happened, but I need them. And I was lucky enough that I never did that, but I could see so clearly how that could happen. Again, we're talking about everything you've ever worked for in your life, everything you've ever dreamt about, and you think this person's the gatekeeper to make that happen. They have helped you, they have developed you, they know you through and through. Like Alberto knew me as an athlete like no other coach I ever had. So it's like, it's so hard to believe you can do it without them. Again, I respect her so much because she survived all of that, but it and I think one of the things I really relate to her at is that she tried to just walk away, and I did too. I tried to just walk away and move on and not think about it anymore, but at some point everything I had seen and experienced just really started to weigh on me, and I started to feel like I'm by me not saying anything, I'm being complicit, and I'm actually enabling this behavior to continue, whether it's with anti-doping violations that I believed I saw, or whether it's with abuse that I experienced. I felt like I was allowing that to continue. And I feel like for her, it was similar. So I really related to her feeling like she had to do this. And that's kind of how I felt too. I felt like I had to see the USADA WADA hearings through. I had to see the Safe Sport thing through, because otherwise I felt like I was partially to blame if it happened to anyone else.
Yeah, I think that that's probably a question that people always have. And it's like, well, why did it take so long? And there's so many layers to it. But ultimately, you get to the point where, you know, what's happening to the next person um, becomes a large part of it. And I think that it really showed in both of your stories. Like, this is not about like a tell all. This is not about getting in the newspaper. This is about helping the next person. And I think, sadly, this is something that we see more and more frequently, whether it's like we're just finding out about it, more people are willing to talk about it, but it's happening, right? So, from your perspective, now that you've got some clarity, you've got the lens to look back at it, what do you tell somebody who is in the middle of justifying these behaviors? Like, how do we help somebody who's going through this right now, that is doing all the things like, I can't do this without them, this is a way of showing attention, all these layers to it? Like, what would you hope that they hear?
There's so much shame involved in it, right? Like, I was an adult and I let this man do this to me. And so I was a grown up. I wasn't some college kid or high school kid or anything like that. So there's a lot of shame involved in it. But I would just say, don't feel the shame. It doesn't define who you are. What happens to you doesn't define who you are. And you have the ability to write the rest of your story. You have the ability to make this stop. And it's super hard and it's really scary, but you can get out of this situation. Like, I literally will talk to you, whoever you are, and I will help you. And I think, there are places to go to talk to people, which I didn't know about back then. I mean, there was no Safe Sport back then, actually. But there are places and people to talk to where you will be believed and you will be listened to. But nobody makes one person. Like, I read your book and I know the situations are different, but I know you have these same types of feelings as well. Not one person makes you who you are. If you're talented, you're talented. And yeah, someone can help you. Someone can coach you to the highest levels, but at the end of the day, that was their job. And you are the one that went out and did the work. You're the one that was alone on the track. You're the one that was alone in that marathon when you won. And so you don't owe them this blind loyalty. And it's hard because there's a lot of emotion involved. You feel really conflicted. But at the end of the day, you deserve to be safe and respected. And whatever it is that you're achieving, you did that. They didn't do that. They might have helped you get there, but they didn't go out and do it on that day. You did. And they don't deserve your loyalty for life just because they were there for you when you were developing as an athlete.
I love that. Is there anything? I asked a lot of questions. I don't know if I asked the right questions, but they were questions that I had, and I think that they're questions that dig into some of the psychology of this. And you know, you're going to have a ton of interviews, and I think we're going to get a bunch of different angles of people asking you things. Is there anything that you want to just say?
I think that just because of what we've talked about today, like I don't see myself as a victim. And I really resisted talking about what happened to me for years because I didn't want any pity. And just to say, like, things can happen to you, but it does not define you. Like, I think that was what the most scary thing about putting this book out there, and was that people would feel bad for me or see me differently. Um, but I'm the same person. I'm the same person who I am to you before you knew this about me, you know? And so it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to rob you of anything in your life moving forward. And there's a lot of weird embarrassment and shame in these situations. And the person who should feel ashamed is the person that did it to you, not you. And you have your whole life to move on and move forward from it. It does not have to be something that follows you for the rest of your life. Just that, I guess, is important to me.
That's perfect. Well, I think it's a great book. There's so much more in it than just that. I think for me, it was so exciting to just roll through your career and read so many highlights and um, be reminded of how amazing you are as an athlete. Be reminded of you accomplishing really hard things and having a voice in the sport and using your platform in a positive way. So I just want to thank you for writing the book, and I wish you the best of luck. I think it's going to be on the top of a lot of lists. So good luck with Pub Day and good luck with the book tour, and have some fun with it.
Thanks, Des. I will.